Hello, this is Richard speaking from his sofa in the garden, and I just want to share some stuff about Jesus. If you're a Muslim, you will read about Jesus from the Quran. If you're a Christian, you'll read about Jesus from the Bible. So I want to have a look at the two. I want to have a look at the Quran, what the Quran contains about Jesus. This is not going to be an in-depth study. It's only a very superficial look at the content that we have in the two sources and what we have in the Bible about Jesus. And so we can compare the two sources and the amount of material and the material that we have in each. I will go into depth in another video about some of this material, but we're just going to start with the basics. So I just want to show you this. This is all the verses from the Quran that mention Jesus. The bits highlighted in highlighter are the words of Jesus, purported words of Jesus in the Quran. If we add up the total of the words purported to be from Jesus, it's probably, I think I've been generous, about 100 words. The rest is just verses that mention Jesus, talk about Jesus in the Quran. And so we see this is the total. This is every reference to Jesus taken from the Quran, and it starts at the beginning of the Quran and ends at Surah 61 verse 14. There are no references after Surah 61 about Jesus in the Quran. So that's what we have contained in the Quran. None of these words of Jesus that are contained in the Quran were words that were heard by eyewitnesses. They are not the words from eyewitnesses. The Quran was compiled in the 7th century, or revealed in the 7th century, as Muslims would say. It was not around in the time of Jesus. So these words are not the words of the reports of eyewitnesses. So that's basically sum total of what the Quran contains about Jesus. We could talk later about some of the mentions of what that information is, but let's just have a look at the Bible. Now, in the Bible, I have these are just references. The others were the surahs written, the verses written out in full. So these are just basically references with maybe a few words to that reference. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of references to prophecies. Now these are just words, prophecies that were written about Jesus, predicting his coming and his life from before he was born. So you see, already we have way more material in the form of prophetic words about Jesus and his life in the Bible than we have in the sum total of the words of Jesus and the messages of Jesus purported to be from Jesus contained in the Quran. And these prophecies start from the book of Genesis and they continue all the way through the Old Testament. Prophecies, symbolism, metaphors, typologies about Jesus, describing how he would be born, where he would be born, describing his life, his mission, starting from Genesis where it says, that the seed of the woman would crush the head of the serpent. Now we know that Jesus was the seed of the woman, and we know that Jesus didn't have an earthly father. He was the seed of the woman, and he would crush the head of the serpent, but the serpent would bruise his heel. We know that Jesus went through the crucifixion experience, and so it was not without cost that Jesus defeated Satan on the cross. So that's just prophetic material. If we go on to actual historical stuff about Jesus, we have the four Gospels. This book here is just the four Gospels in a book form. It contains Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. These four books were written in the 1st century, and they were written by people who were either eyewitnesses or who knew eyewitnesses. So these are accounts from the 1st century during the lifetime of people who would have seen Jesus, who would have heard Jesus, who would have heard what he said. And don't forget, Jesus preached and ministered in Jerusalem, and he was seen by thousands of people. He was followed by crowds. His death was witnessed at the busiest time of the year, the Passover. So many people saw Jesus and heard Jesus. And these are put in here. Now, if we were actually to look at the words of Jesus, the actual words that were spoken by Jesus, that are actually words recorded that he spoke, this is a book, The Complete Words of Jesus. It contains all the words that Jesus spoke. About 50% of the Gospels are actually the words of Jesus. Some are 60, some are 40, but when you average it out, you could say that 50% of each Gospel is purely the words of Jesus. And that's before we get onto the New Testament, the accounts of John, in the letters of John and Peter and the other disciples. So we see that there is vastly more material about Jesus in the Bible than there is in the Quran. It's just way more information, way more, and it's closer to the events. It's from eyewitnesses or people who knew eyewitnesses, and even the prophecies. Purely on the prophecies alone, there is more material in prophetic words about Jesus before he was born than contained in the Quran. So my question to you is, if you wanted to know about Jesus, where would you go? Would you go to the Quran, or would you go to the Bible? We will look at further videos. We'll look at some of this material and the authenticity of it. But I'm just going to leave that out there for you now to peruse and to think about for yourself. Thank you very much.